Adopting the best of regenerative and conventional farming practices, merging them, if you will. That's what we're talking about with Clint Frese and Kelly Garrett in this episode of Calibrate Your Agronomy. Hey there, we got a great one for you today because it's something that Kelly Garrett has been talking about a lot. We do it over on Extreme Ag, and we're doing it now here with Calibrated Agronomy because if you've not seen this before, it's absolutely where the future is going for soil-minded farming operations. We're talking about taking the best of regenerative farming and mixing it with the best of conventional farming. What are we talking about? We're talking about things like cover crops. We're talking about reduction of applied nutrients. We're talking about things that work more in concert with your soil biology versus working against it. Turns out many of the things that we've been doing conventionally for decades is actually counter to what really our natural biomes of our soils would work and do. No, we're not talking about hugging trees. We're not talking about running barefooted through meadows. We're just talking about how you can improve your farming operation. Clint Frese, the calibrated system. This is where you think things are going. It's where Kelly absolutely is already taking things on his operation. Why does this matter to you?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think there's a lot of good things from the conventional system that most farmers are used to, and there's a lot of good things for regen, but sometimes they don't work everywhere. And for me, what I think the future of this is, why the calibrated system is important. It's for not wasting dollars. It's for getting the most bang out of our crop, but also looking at the long-term goals of having our soils work for us long-term. So to me, it's bridging those gaps and using data to drive those decisions, Damian.
When I think about conventional, Kelly, I can go back to moldboard plow. Fall tillage, running over the field in the spring, and 3 passes of cultivation, and how wrong that was. I find it interesting that there are still farmers that excessively till, and it's not only bad for erosion purposes. We've learned more about the structure of the soil and how it degrades soil structure, and it actually decreases organic matter. All these things that we didn't know, we know better now. Seems to me it's time to start adopting practices that are more in concert with what our soil wants to do naturally.
Absolutely. And to me, it's all about increasing the ROI. I would tell you that a lot of people, they believe we want to go no-till because we want to be more environmental and things like that. And I obviously never want to be bad for the environment, but my goal is just to improve that ROI. And we have learned in our soils, why do I need to make those tillage passes? The yield isn't better. I'll tell you the corn is prettier, but that doesn't put money in the bank account. And I just don't need to make those passes. Now, from a soil structure standpoint, we're learning more and more about that, but I didn't know about that when I started no-till. I just knew it didn't make a yield difference. I will also tell you that I need to do it for erosion control in my hills. But I would just, anybody that believes that they need to do all of this tillage, is there a yield component tied to it? And have you really explored it? We're constantly trying things on our farm to make sure that the expense is paying us back something.
Clint, take me down the road of how you see the merger happening. He's already doing it. We'll talk about it. But where do you see things going when we say adopting the best of regenerative and the best of conventional? What's the best of regenerative that we need to adopt?
Well, I think the best of regenerative is doing less tillage, doing cover crops. I mean, we're incorporating them where we are. We're really flat, so we've had a lot of negative yield consequences surrounding those. Or if we make mistakes in a wet year or works a piece of ground too wet. But I think it's also having common sense that if I compact the crap out of my flat soil, that I come in and reset it and start over. That it's okay to, can't push a shovel in the dirt. Maybe you need to loosen it up. So, each individual piece, different geographies have different sets of challenges, and ours is a little different than Kelly's per se. So for me, it's a little bit of common sense and bridging those things, but it's working at the long-term goal of getting our soils to give nutrients back to us that we've been building for years. And that's a lot of that's doing practices that change the environment for the better of our biology, to let the biology work for us.
All right. So on those things like you're talking about to change the soil biology, this is something that we know more about now than we did, but we still don't know as much as we need to. What things are you doing? So you said cover crops don't necessarily work for you, or they do?
They do. It's like our geography. We've got some. We got hill ground, light timber soils, highly eroded clay hillside stuff. Work great. We no longer have to pull a dozer in there spring and fall to shut the gullies up. Where when we was doing tillage. However, some of our flat ground that isn't tiled, that's real swampy dirt. Like our area when it was settled was a swamp. It was prairie grass riddled with snakes. They drug logs with oxen to level the grass, and then they hand dug ditches in that ground. Some of those situations, even the best guys in our area that do cover crops have abandoned those fields. They're doing covers on their hill ground. They're doing covers on their tiled ground that they've got drainage addressed on, but maybe they're still setting out on those fields. So just the common sense aspect to that, Damian. It's not not trying to dig on that practice, just bringing reality back to it, I guess, a little bit.
On the regenerative thing that you think that we adopted, you went full tilt on cover crops and cycling cattle into it. So the person that's going to be a naysayer, Kelly, is going to say, "This is all cool. I've been hearing about this regenerative thing for the last several years, but you know what? I don't have livestock." You don't have to have livestock to adopt some of the best of regenerative, but you do. Kind of take me down the road of both schools of thought. I don't have livestock. I do have livestock. What's the benefit, and how do I make it work on my farm?
Well, when we do have livestock, the cover crops are put in for, to continue to put the carbon in the soil. You're getting organic matter in the soil. We are constantly cycling. Something's always growing. I believe there's a weed control, and there's a moisture retention component to it. But there is obviously an expense to putting those cover crops in. So if you don't have livestock, how are you making the cover crops pay? Well, it's all the things I just listed. The moisture retention, the erosion control, the carbon cycling, all those things. Now with the livestock, we've added another component. And what we're trying to do is, the corn and soybean rotation doesn't work for us so well. We're trying to, as I say, rotate corn and cows. Johnny and Temple and Chad all talk about their double crop, wheat and soybeans. I'm now trying to use my cover crops to be a revenue source to double crop cows and corn. And I want to have that extra feed out there to do that, to bring the livestock in. And, carbon is neither created nor destroyed. It's just transferred. Cows are simply a carbon transfer device, and they speed that transfer up.
What do you think the argument then is usually always the naysayer, this won't work, this won't work, this won't work. You're out here as Calibrated Agronomy, Clint, trying to get farmers to change up for the better. I mean, obviously, you're not a zealot. You're not doing this because you're not out here because you've got some mission. You're doing it because you want to improve their bottom line. What's the journey on that when you work with one of your clients and say, "Here's what we're doing. I think you can make this work." Take me down that path.
Yeah. So really what we're about is, on the conventional side, we're going to more fertilizer placement. We don't really look at standard soil fertility test as a benchmark that we can equate to yield anymore. But, the old mindset of your soil is a bank, we visualize that as the soil is one of the most expensive storehouses, for nutrients. We're all about feeding the plant for that season. So we're going to placement. A lot of my guys that are really adopting this stuff, we're in our area, we're doing strip tills. We're putting cover crops in between the strips, limiting our impact of fertilizer, going to a much reduced rate because we're banding it. We do a lot of in-season nutrition with foliars and Y drops, really focus on letting that plant tell the story through its sap analysis, making a blend. And that's how we're making it work on corn, cover crops in front of corn. We're putting that strip till still in there and keeping those separate. We don't have any erosion control. We are bringing in more carbon to the soil. So that's kind of what our ideology is being able to get more efficient with our nutrition all coupled together with this. So
Kelly, none of this stuff sounds too wacko to me. So when you say the word regenerative, then people go down the road of organic. You've made the point that regenerative and organic are not only not the same thing, they actually have some diametric opposition to one another in terms of school of thought and practice.
Yes, if you want to be organic and capture that marketplace and stuff, I think that's great, and I support your mission there. But organic is not regenerative; they're different. With organics, the multiple passes they have to make across the soil for weed control, things like that, that's not regenerative. That's not building soil structure. That's not using carbon cycling and things like that. Because my goodness, every time you make that tillage pass, you're releasing carbon. Carbon to me is the most important nutrient that I have in all of my crops, and it is the least expensive one. I just need to photosynthesize it, sequester it, and put it in the soil. Organic people simply can't do that because of the tillage passes they make.
Right. What about then if the first thing that comes up, Clint, is you're in the Midwest, I'm in the Midwest, Kelly's in the Midwest, and everybody I've ever heard their first opposition to cover crops are part of regenerative. In general, it's not the only element, right? The regenerative also is cutting back on chemical synthetic inputs. It doesn't mean going without them. The first opposition is always, I can't get cover crops to grow here because I don't have the season. If I was in the South, I could make that work because I have more season. That's, I think, the first opposition. Is that the first opposition you hear?
Yeah, especially as we go north from like where I'm at in West Central Illinois. The farther I go north, the more I hear that. However, I've got guys making it work up north where they maybe have found a hybrid that has an earlier maturity. They can take out earlier, and on the right fall, they're getting a cover crop in. It's not always, the Mother Nature sometimes does win, and they can't get it done. So in those cases where we have those, we still are going to a more aggressive in-season nutrient management program, reducing tillage or tilling, maybe in just like we talked about earlier, in a strip till ban where we're not upsetting that whole soil profile like we used to, and can be pretty dang effective and usually slash some pretty big expenses. So,
yeah. What about the best of conventional? What are we keeping from that? We say adopting the best of both of them for your hybrid system. What is it that from conventional that we're doing? Mostly what you already named. You talked, but more that you're doing it. It's more reduced conventional. It's more modified conventional. You said you're still using chemistry. You're still using applied fertility, but you're doing it in a different way. How have you modified your conventional? Tell me.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, so for our area and a lot of the farmers we get to work with, a lot of them are still all fall fertilizer, NH3, DAP, potash. In a lot of cases, the guys we work with, they may still utilize those tools, but at 50%, 40 to 50% less, because we are making room for the other things we're doing, Damian. So
what have you done just in the last few years, probably just since I started working with you, Kelly, that you would call conventional, but regenerative conventional?
The top of the list, I would say the anhydrous.
Meaning?
Well, the use of anhydrous, I would say most people would not consider to be regenerative, but I have not found in my soils, in my operation, I've not found another nitrogen source that is two things: less expensive than anhydrous and produces a better yield. But we were doing it on the regenerative side because we have validated how much nitrogen is being released from the soil. So we've turned the anhydrous down 30%, 35%, I would say overall, which to me is regenerative. But I didn't do it to be regenerative. I did it because I think we don't need to provide that synthetic fertility when Mother Nature's providing.
Yeah. And so, by the way, just think about that. And you say, "Oh, is there a benefit?" Okay, you guys are pitching me on adopting regenerative. You just said you took applied NH3 down by a third.
Yes,
and that's not on a 1 year thing to save money. That's now become a common practice.
It is, and I would really tell you that as we study and go forward, I think we can go lower.
Yeah.
And because we don't need it to maintain yield.
Okay. So there's one thing, applied nitrogen. By the way, there are those that are purists that would say, well, that's still a destructive form of nitrogen because you go through there knifing in anhydrous and it still does it still bangs up your soil biology a lot.
Absolutely it is. I don't deny that, but I really want it to be fall applied anhydrous. The biology of the soil, in my opinion, is very forgiving and will heal itself. And so I agree with them that in that band where we apply that anhydrous, it's killing that biology. When I do it in the fall, when the soil's dormant, then you give it time in the spring, it heals up. I think it's fine. This year, we're going to have some spring applied anhydrous because of the weather last fall. We couldn't get it all done. I'm going to tell you, I believe it comes with a yield component. The difference between fall applied anhydrous and spring applied, I believe fall applied is a yield plus.
Okay.
So they're right. Still isn't a better system. I still don't have something that I can reliably beat it with.
So combining regenerative, what we're going to call regenerative conventional, which means you're kind of taking this and this and this, cover crops. You've made it work. We've talked about a number of times over in Extreme Ag, and you're plenty north. You're not too awful far from South Dakota, so that's starting to get pretty far north. How do you make cover crops work when people that are 300 miles south of you pretend that they can't?
So I do not want to put out 45 or 50 pounds of cereal rye. I, in fact, don't want to put out any cereal rye. I believe when people talk about cover crops, the default vision in their head is cereal rye. Yep. There's an allopath effect there. If you have soil-borne diseases, which we do, causes a seedling disease, then you're planting green into that very lush rye. It looks nice until your corn comes up, and then it's a problem. We use other things like annual rye. We use peas. We use turnips. We use radishes. We use kales. We use other products out there, other species of plants out there other than cereal rye that will overwinter oats, buckwheat, different things like that to come up to do the same job. We just don't use the cereal rye. And that is how we make it work. This year, we're going to experiment with seeding it sooner. And when I say sooner, I mean middle of June. And but the reason I'm doing that, there'll be some erosion control. There'll be some more moisture retention, things like that, weed suppression. But I'm doing that to try to increase the feed for the cows when the corn comes off. Again, we're making a revenue stream we're trying to make a revenue stream out of the cover crop with the cattle feed.
Clint, where do biological products, Calibrated Agronomy has a whole line of biological products. How do they fit into adopting the best of regenerative? I'm going to assume you're going to tell me, well, one component of regenerative is anything you can do to reduce heavy loads of synthetic fertility or chemistry. Is that where biologicals have a fit?
Absolutely. I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a nutrient use efficiency, 15 to 40%, depending on the geography as a whole. And it varies due to the weather environment as well. The other big thing I think that's doing, we are completing carbon cycles in the soils. We've identified microbial pathways that will complete that pathway all the way to take an inorganic material all the way to stable humus. So being able to complete that chain, and then the most important is we're able to limit our applied fungicide to the soil. We want our beneficial bacteria and fungi to outcompete pathogens. And that's the big one to me. We may still have to use fungicide late in the season, but we feel we can be extremely effective using biology in that way.
Kelly's not.
Can I give my farm answer on that one?
Yep.
So I don't like biology. Agronomy is chemistry plus biology. When I say chemistry, I mean elements and fertility and things like that. Agronomy is chemistry plus biology. I take a lot of comfort out of the chemistry side because it's math. We can figure it out. It's very easy. It's black and white. If you go to biology, it can be unpredictable. And I don't like biology because of the unpredictability, and it's hard to get an ROI. That's what drew us to Clint and Luke. That's what drew us. The biology they have is different. The things that Clint brings to the table are different. There's a lot of biological products on the marketplace that I would say bring a lot of offense, okay? But there's not much defense. The biology that Clint has is there's defense. And then we don't need the fungicide, the things like that. It combats the soil-borne diseases that we have. Fungicide will combat the soil-borne diseases I have. However, it kills everything in the soil. And that's not great for soil health. Clint's products help with the soil health because they are defense as well as offense. And so now I'm coming around because of Clint. I'm coming around and I like biology, but I like the right biology that helps with the soil-borne diseases we have. And Clint does a great job.
Well, I just want to say this, Kelly. I brought math back to it. See, for our biology now, we test our CFU levels or colony forming units in the soil. And we know the colony forming units.
Wait. Because the average person in agriculture is going to say soil testing means checking in P and K. And now we do a little bit better because, like with the extreme ag guys, now it's zinc and boron and all those kind of things. So, and then we've covered before. There's macros, which isn't even true. There's nitrogen, which is its own category of a super macro. Then there's the macros. Then there's the micros. Then there's the mini micros, or whatever you want to call them, micros. Nobody soil tests, and then the organic matter became a thing we soil tested for. And then we still had these silly people that are out here saying, like I've referenced a number of times, I heard an agronomy guy stay in a conference once, it's impossible to increase organic matter in our lifetime. That's not true. So now you're talking about a new thing we're testing for, CFUs.
Yeah. You know, I was looking at my grandpa's old soil test from the 80s. It was a star system for P and K. You got 4 stars if he was doing really good, Damian. So, but CFU levels, it's colony forming units. That's how they measure biology, especially bacteria. So
how new is this? How new is this, Clint?
It's the technology has become affordable for farmers and for companies like myself in the last 5 to 7 years, probably. But long story short, when we can look at Kelly's soil and say that he has 1 million colony forming units of Fusarium in his soil, we know we need the beneficial counterpart, the Trichoderma hazard, some of the bacillus, to outcompete that Fusarium to be greater than 1 million. And so Kelly's opposition to biology is valid because we've never looked at it from that aspect of actually what is the levels. And here's the other caveat that still is the puzzle piece we're all trying to learn is the environment can change the CFU levels. So moisture levels, humidity levels, temperature levels. So it's a constant battle that we're working at, but it's a little different approach.
Are you testing for colony forming units? Is Evans out in Wingrove? Are they around Garrett Land and Cal checking for colony forming units in your soil?
Yeah, that's part of what the soil test that they measure. I don't know if Wingrove knows it or not, but yes, that's what he's doing.
And that started when? A year ago?
Yeah. You know, we've been working with Clint for 3 years, and it just keeps getting more and more. And now we're all one big happy family, in my opinion.
Clint, the person that you run across that says, I've heard about this regenerative stuff, I'll never do it. You're not going to change your mind. You know, it's futile. Probably there's people that just are going to absolutely decide that their current system works and all that. I would make the case from an environmental standpoint, you have no choice but to cut back on synthetics because of environmental pressure that ag is going to be under. That's my impression. What would you tell the person that says, I'll never adopt anything from regenerative because I'm happy doing what I do. I till the shit out of the ground and I use all kinds of chemicals and fertilizer. I'm old school. What do you tell those people?
You know, a lot of times I love America because we can all do our own thing, you know, in a sense. But I do agree. I bring up the topic you just brought up. I think there is going to be increased environmental pressure. I think there's increased consumer pressure to deliver a better good, a more nutrient dense good, and that takes this biology. It takes some of these. The adoption of some of these things where we're not degrading our soil environment. So I think the future is the path we're going down. I don't think I know the future is what we're going down, and it's coming sooner or later. And whenever, you know, I think that getting ahead of the curve is important and not waiting for the government to tell us what to do.
Kelly, when you talk about biological products and you're somewhat opposition to it, the Calibrated Agronomy has a whole bunch of lineup of biological products. I don't have to use biologicals to consider myself to be a regenerative operator. but it seems to walk down the same hallway holding hands, but it's not that they have to go together, right?
No, and I'm not using Clint's products to try to be regenerative. I'm using Clint's products, honestly, for me, to try to battle those soil-borne diseases, but maintain the soil health. The products that Clint has that I use has nothing to do with being regenerative. It has to do with addressing the problem in my operation and trying to fix it. If someone wants to define that as being regenerative, that's fine. But I'm simply trying to fix that problem. And this is the best way I've found to fix the problem.
Then, speaking of the hardcore conventional, there are also hardcore regenerative, and there are some problems with that. Clint, before we hit the record button, said, listen, I'm not a zealot any direction. You already gave your. I almost wanted to sing the Star Spangled Banner when you went down that thing about America and being able to do what you want. I mean, you kind of sort of evoked some national pride there. You really did. Should I point out that we're recording this the day that the tariffs against all the world went into effect? I mean, you kind of went down the nationalist vein right there, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you
offended all of our Canadian listeners, but aside from that,
you can't make everybody happy, Damian. But
trust me, I've been on stage for 31 years. I very much know you're never going to please everybody.
No, and it's not to knock. I think sometimes when we truly think about farming, it's trying to manage the soil's physical characteristics, biological characteristics, and the chemistry. And I think anytime we go one side too far, we go all biology, all region, and we forget about the minerals, and we forget about the nutrient antagonisms in the soil, and we forget about our environment we're dealing with. I'm seeing some cases to where guys buy into that camp so much that it's causing major yield problems. It's not everywhere. There's no standard to it, but I think they're meeting in the middle and using common sense and trying to think about how all these tools fit together. It is at the end of the day the most scalable and logistically feasible. That's going to be the most profitable. So
it verges a little bit on the zealotry. I can buy into it. I'm all about the agronomics and all that, but I think Kelly probably is the best on that. When you said you didn't get into this because of any that you wanted to be a zealot, you got into this because purely it looked like it was a better system. Took care of the hills, took care of erosion, took care of the soil, and also had a bottom line feature to it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be conventional. I'm not trying to be regenerative. I'm trying to make the best living possible in the short term and the long term.
Yeah.
The erosion control, we've got to maintain that the soil on the hillsides. We've got to maintain those yields to be fully regenerative. I doubt that those people would want to use the pesticide, the fungicide, or the anhydrous that I use. I don't want to use fungicide and pesticide necessarily every year, but if it needs it to protect my crop, I will. And we're constantly looking for ways to improve, but my goal is to do what's best for my farm. And I think everybody listening needs to educate themselves. If you're in the hills like I am, or you're in the flat ground like Clint is, you need to educate yourself on what system works best in your soil and tailor make that system. It's not a black and white thing at all.
To the person that you call it the calibrated farming system, Calibrated Agronomy, your company. If a person is listening to this, Clint, and they want to take the first step toward regenerative, what are you going to tell them to do? What's the first step?
Reach out.
Give me steps 1, 2, and 3 so that it makes it easy. So I'm like, all right, I'm not going to go full tilt. What am I going to do to start with?
Well, I think step 1 is to reevaluate your fertility program and start small. Start with some of these. If you're going to start adopting cover crops, no-till, start small. And the easiest place I've found to start cover crops in our geography.
So your first step is either reduction of tillage or cover crops. Which one?
Reduction.
Give me 1, 2, and 3.
Reduction of tillage is 1.
All right, reduction of tillage is 1.
Yeah.
That seems like it's an easy one. All you got to do, that's not even something you have to do. It's now something you don't do. It seems like that's the easy one, right?
It is easy. And then 2, I would think just think about your farm's geography, but anything with a slight roll, cover crops seem to work for us. Anything that's super flat, we have more of shifting yield paradigm depending on what Mother Nature throws.
First thing, if I want to become regenerative, is reduce my tillage. Second thing is experiment with cover crops, and then the third thing,
I think with today's advancements in hybrids, and the understanding we have with biology and nutrient tie-up in the soil, I think the third thing is to start adopting in-season nutrient management programs, incorporating the biological inoculants. I think those things have serious merit going forward.
And
I think the third thing is a soil test to verify and validate what's in your soil, the fertility,
beyond just the minerals, beyond
the fertility and the diseases, to then know what the next step is. If there's diseases in your soils, the biological inoculant, like he said, then the in-season nutrient management plan. What's in the soil, what's the soil releasing, and what do we need to supplement the crop with to make up for what the soil is not giving us?
That's actually, none of those steps are that hard. None of those steps are that hard, other than I've got to get my hands around some new product usage, biological inoculants, but that's all stuff. I'm already going across the field a couple of times in the summer, fall anyway. It's just a matter of changing what's in the mix, right?
And how do you, the SAP test and the rapid soil test that we take throughout the season, how do you manage what you don't measure?
And SAP test, by the way, is something that we've talked about over on our Extreme Ag job. But on that's a newer thing, but it's a more expensive thing, but it's like 10 times more actionable because you know what's happening in your plants right now. So that's something you recommend also.
Go ahead, Clint.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is actionable. And then the cool thing about what we're doing is building databases off of season-long sap trends in high manure ground, in highly eroded ground, in conventional fertilizer ground, in regen ground. So as a team, our team is getting pretty well versed on what nutrient issues across multiple different farming systems are. So reach out to us. I think we can shed insight and for sure pull some. There's no way to better learn on your own farm than to do it. So
Calibrated Agronomy is Mike Evans, is Jared Cook, is a place for information. I can get biological products to help me farm better from you, and I can also get consultation on making my farm the calibrated system, which is adopting the best of regenerative and conventional, right?
As well as nutrition. We do a lot of nutritional products, Damian, too. I mean, we're very focused on nutritionals as well. So
if I want to learn more about this, where do I go?
Calibrate Your Agronomy.
Calibrate Your Agronomy. His name is Clint Frese. He's joined by Kelly Garrett. I'm Damian Mason. Till next time, this is the Calibrate Your Agronomy episode, all about adopting the best of regenerative and conventional. Share it with somebody that can benefit from it. Also, these are always chopped into little teeny tidbits, so if you don't have time to watch one of the full-length ones, just watch some of the little tidbits when you're driving along, when you're doing whatever, because it'll help you farm better. Till next time, thanks for being here. I'm Damian Mason.